Good evening, everybody. I'm Dick Wolfsie. This is Night Talk, and our topic tonight is atheism. We're going to test your tolerance a little bit and find out what you think about people who are, in fact, atheists. Maybe you'll be surprised at some of their specific beliefs. Sometimes it's a topic that people are a little bit unsure of exactly what it means. Before we begin tonight, I would like you to hear a portion of an audio tape that is part of something called Dial-an-Atheist. And it's a number you can dial here in the Midwest, specifically in Indiana and in the Ohio area. But let's listen to it right now. This is what you'd hear if you dial today.
Thank you for dialing an atheist. If you have serious doubts concerning the literal truth and moral rectitude of the Bible, if you find it impossible to believe that Jesus and Moses actually did all the magic tricks listed in the job experience section of their placement portfolios, if you have dialed this number simply because of the novelty of atheists exercising their right to free speech, but feel that religion is an unimportant factor in your life, and you can't get excited enough to take a public position either for or against religion, if you feel that Jerry Falwell and the other electric high-voltage preachers are harming America and working to destroy your personal freedoms, if you think these statements describe the way you feel, welcome to the ranks of the mentally competent and emotionally healthy. This message usually will change daily. Thank you for dialing an atheist, and please call again.
And by the way, you could call us today as well, because we're going to be taking your phone calls with questions and comments about atheism. But I want to get some reaction in the audience here. Stand up, please. Tell us your name.
My name's Steve Goodbar.
Steve, that's the first time you've heard that. What kind of reaction do you have to it?
Well, I think of two things when I hear that. First of all, I think there's a little bitterness you hear in their voices, maybe, and some things that they're bringing out. And it offends me personally. I'm a Christian. And it offends me personally because they suggest that you have to sacrifice your intellect to be a Christian.
Yeah. Are you personally offended by it?
Well, yeah. I feel sorry for them in a way because I feel like maybe this bitterness was brought on maybe by something maybe it's happened in their lives or something, and maybe they're trying to blame God and strike out against God. And
they do have a right to produce something like that, though, don't they?
Well, good question.
Good question. We'll get to that later. Let's ask somebody else their reaction here. Stand up. Tell us your name.
Kathy Haggard.
And Kathy, what's your reaction to it's just a portion of the actual tape, but what do you think of it?
I'm personally offended because I consider myself confident, and I believe in God, and I believe that there's more proof that God exists than proof that He doesn't exist.
Are you willing to speak more about that a little bit later?
Yes.
Okay, it's not sure. Just out of curiosity, just by applause, how many people found the tape offensive? If you did find it somewhat offensive, just applaud. Okay. Our topic tonight is atheism. We'll talk to 4 avowed atheists in just a moment. Stay tuned, everybody.
You're online for Dick Wolfsie's Night Talk, the program you can talk to. Night Talk on WPDS is brought to you by White.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome again to Night Talk. We're glad you joined us this evening. We have 4 very interesting guests tonight. Our topic is atheism. Our phones are open at 632-6027, as always, but especially tonight, because we think we have an issue that is probably as controversial as any issue that we'll ever do on this program, and that's the topic of atheism. So give us a call. Once again, it's 632-6027. Let me introduce our guest to you right now. Our first guest is Dr. John Beversluis, and John is the chairman of the philosophy department at Butler University right here in Indianapolis. Also joining us is Tony Pasquarello, and Tony is a professor of philosophy at Ohio State University here from Columbus, and we thank you, sir, for being with us. Our third guest is the creator, excuse the expression, of
no excuse needed.
is the creator of the audio tape.
I'm a real creator, not a fake one.
Not a fake one. Aha, we're starting already. His name is Frank Zindler. He's a neurophysiologist by profession. He is also the director of the Central Ohio chapter of American Atheists, and he too comes from Columbus. And thank you, Frank, for being with us. Our third guest is Lloyd Thoren, and Lloyd is the national director of the American Atheists, and he is the founder of the American Atheist Museum, and that's something we're going to hear more about a little bit later. And we thank you for coming too from Petersburg, Indiana. Is that correct?
That's right.
Thank you, sir, for being with us. Boy, reaction to the tape was predictable, I suppose. But let me tell you, Frank, I think, and a lot of people heard this before we did the show, there is something that strikes me as very inflammatory about it, and the rhetoric almost strikes me as though it was, for those who are critical of Falwell himself, that smacks of that same kind of emotional appeal. What do you think?
Well, I don't see it that way, of course. To me, this particular message was sort of a throwing out the lifeline type of thing. Atheists tend to be very isolated. We are persecuted by the mainly Christian majority, and so most atheists have to hide their atheism. They're closet atheists. If you are a school teacher and you're found out as an atheist, you're likely to be fired. If you have a business and the good Christians discover that you are an atheist, you'll go out of business. This happens all the time. And so this particular message was designed to let people out there know that if they are able to think clearly and so on, they aren't really all that rare in the population, and that we have an organization to which they can come to meet like-minded people. Of course, people who haven't studied religion deeply may be offended by this, but if anybody has studied the Bible, he knows that there are some pretty outrageous things in the Bible.
Let me interrupt you a second. I want everybody else to speak to this too, but I want to hear one more piece of the tape before we continue, and then let's have our other gentleman respond as well. This is a sort of a second portion of the same tape. Let's go ahead and hear it.
Thank you for dialing an atheist. If you have serious doubts concerning the literal truth and moral rectitude of the Bible, if you suspect that the doctrines of heaven and hell are devices concocted to make people docile and follow the leader by alternately threatening them with punishment if they should think for themselves and dangling before them a carrot to induce them to follow orders mindlessly, if you suspect that when you die you will be dead, period, and that resurrection of the body is somewhat less than likely, say about as likely as learning how to unboil an egg, if you don't feel that you need supernatural approval before exercising one of the major organ systems of your body in the way you think appropriate, if you feel that when people pray they are talking to themselves and practicing autosuggestion, if you think these statements describe the way you feel, welcome to the ranks of the mentally competent and emotionally healthy. If you think that you're the only kid on the block who feels this way, however, you're wrong. A conservative estimate would place you among the 11 to 15% of the American population who are atheists, agnostics, and free thinkers. Welcome to the ranks.
Gentlemen, am I right? Would you do the same kind of tape, John? Is it a bit inflammatory, or how do you respond to it?
No, I wouldn't do that kind of a tape. I'm not a Christian, and I'm not offended, therefore, but I can very easily understand why people are offended by it. At the same time, I don't want to drive a wedge between myself and these other three men that I've just met tonight. What I would say is this, to suggest that only atheists are mentally competent and emotionally healthy is to make, I think, a fairly outrageous claim. I don't think that the Christian religion is true. I don't think that the Christian religion is true, but I certainly think that it deserves to be taken with a great deal more seriousness and respect than that.
May I respond to that? I don't see any reason. This is not the debate
I thought I'd get, but this is fine.
I don't see any reason to respect neurosis. And while there may be a few mentally healthy Christians somewhere, they are certainly a minority if they really believe literally the things they mouth. Now, fortunately, most Christians do not believe the nonsense they mouth daily. They don't really believe all that stuff. And so most so-called Christians are, in fact, mentally healthier than one might suppose. And that's simply because they don't believe literally what they're saying.
I think it's like if the audience were little children and all still believed in Santa Claus, then we are in the position here of trying to explain to them that Santa Claus was just a story they were told when they were younger.
But Santa Claus is not just... Excuse me. Sorry, I thought you were finished.
No, please.
Santa Claus is just a story that they were told as children. Christianity is not just a story they were told as children. Christianity, and I'm by no means...
It's a different story.
It's much more than a story. It's a historical, philosophical, social phenomenon which has shaped Western society and continues to shape it for 2,000 years. I'm not here to defend it. But I certainly think it should get a fair representation.
Yes, but you agree... You agree that a vast majority of some of the stories are entirely fiction.
Yeah, I agree to that.
And you must also agree that Christianity has created great harm in Western civilization. The outlawing of science...
Wait, who must agree to that?
Well, I'm sure Dr. Beversluis
studies.
anyone who objectively studies it.
All right, I like the disagreement, but let's see if we have agreement here. Do we agree that Christianity, religion, if you will, I don't know how we want to, approach this, has been detrimental to civilization? Is this what all you
Well,
you agree?
religion did one good thing. It did reform the calendar.
Okay.
So it hasn't been all bad.
All right, seriously, Tony, go ahead.
Well, I would say on balance, you have to look at the great works of art and music which were inspired by various Christian motifs, but then, of course, you have to look at the Inquisition and the tortures and the persecutions. If you're aware of some events which are taking place in my town right now, Mansfield, Ohio, and there are some really well-known trials. One person who's beheading several of his children because he was performing an exorcism. Another one who was trying to feed a 3-year-old girl rose petals because they were the body of Christ, and drowned her in a religious cleansing ritual. And these things are in your papers every day, and they can be attributed to the influence of religions. Which
I realize how carefully, I was going to say, let me play devil's advocate. I have to be real careful about some of the terminology I use here, but I wonder if we can't make a distinction between, I don't think anybody, including the people in the audience who seem to be obviously opposed to much of what you're saying, I don't think anybody is supporting, I don't think, a blind obedience to anything. I mean, blind obedience to nationalism has created wars. A blind obedience to another human being is probably dangerous.
So when we're talking about religious, is Bible-based, in Romans where it says, you shall obey the authority. This was used to tell the good Christians of Germany that they had to follow Hitler. It was used by the conservative churches to tell Americans they had to follow Nixon. Religion is there to keep people servile, to keep them following any dictator or any leader. And this is why religion evolved. It is a tool for the control of the masses.
So political people like religion, you're saying?
Oh, of course they do. Of course they do.
Yes.
Quite frankly, I'm delighted that people are offended because the atheist movement is beginning to take a page from the gay lib movement, the women's lib movement, the black lib movement, and say, look, we're deluged in our papers with the prayer of the day and the hymn of the hour and the message of the week. We're deluged on our currency with slogans. Put yourselves in our position for a change. Every great thinker, every moral leader has been offensive, from Socrates to Galileo to Martin Luther King. Comfort is not the way to knowledge and enlightenment. You have to be a little upset. You have to be made uncomfortable.
Look at the problems, for instance, in Northern Ireland. The Catholics versus the Protestants. In fact, the IRA just set off a bomb under their main lady. And the problems it's causing in Lebanon. You have the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians. The three major religions all having a continuing war going on there. In Adolf Hitler's time, who was in the Holocaust, the Jewish people who were of Jewish religion. In earlier days, slavery was carefully justified in the Bible by the Southern preachers.
Let me just suggest one to the other side of that, and then let's take a phone call. One could just as easily sit here with four people of faith and point to all of the good things that religion has done, whether it be the beginning of movements to abolish slavery.
That was the extreme heretical wing of the Christian groups that did that. And you had Lincoln, who was a heretic. He was very close to being an atheist, and he didn't believe the Bible. And he certainly had something to do with getting rid of slavery.
Okay, let's take a phone call. Go ahead, please. You are on the air. Your question or comment, please, right now.
I just wanted to know if you had any proof that God exists.
Okay, well, you're asking the wrong bunch of people.
There is no proof that God exists and lots of evidence against it.
Okay, are you looking for proof yourself?
No.
Why do you ask the question? I mean, why do you ask these people if there's any proof? Where is the burden of proof?
Well, I would say that in any other field of science, the total lack of evidence is so enormous insofar as any evidence of the existence of God, that it would be eliminated as a possibility in any other field of science, like astronomy or whatever else. If something doesn't exist, they simply say it is non-existent. But in religion, because of its apparent popular and cultural appeal generated by its 400,000 preachers in this country, probably the biggest sales force of any country in the world selling a myth.
The burden of proof is always on the person. To answer your question, the burden of proof is always on the person who maintains the existence of a non-empirical entity. If you say there's an invisible man in the corner, you have to do the proving. I don't have to prove there isn't.
Except, and I think this is something we need to talk about when we come back, if the issue here is in fact, and the distinction between what you gentlemen are saying and what everyone else, not everyone else, but others are saying, is a question of faith, faith, by the very definition of what it is, suggests that you don't need proof, and that's what makes faith what faith is.
And that's why it's so dangerous.
Okay, let me tell you, everybody, again, the phones are open, 632-6027. We know everybody's got strong feelings about this. We're going to take a short break, and we'll come right back.
Get in on the Night Talk. Call now, 632-6027. Our phone lines are open. Give us a call at 632-6027.
Thank you, everybody. Back on Night Talk, I'm Dick Wolfsie. Our number is 632-6027. Our topic is atheism. If you have a comment for or against or a question, please, this is the time to call. Our lines are open, and we appreciate your participation in the show. That's what makes this show so much fun. And it is fun tonight because we have some great disagreement here in the audience between our guests and the people that have been invited in the audience. John Beversluis, you had a comment. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I wanted to thank the caller for bringing the issue back to where I think it ought to be. The question is not, after all, was whether Christianity is harmful or beneficial. The question is whether it's true or false. It's altogether possible that a belief could be true but harmful, or false but beneficial.
Absolutely.
So the caller put us back, I think, on the right track. And if I could just make two comments to focus the discussion, at least as I think it should be focused. If you disagree, ignore it. But I think what we should do, first of all, is define atheism. It's not a self-explanatory term. This is not going to be a speech, I promise. People often say you can take three possible views on God. You can be a theist, you can believe in God, you can be an atheist and not believe in God, or you can be an agnostic and say you're not sure, you don't know. It seems to me that's not a very useful definition. It seems not definition, classification. I prefer to look at it this way. You can be a theist and say you believe in God. You can also be two kinds of atheists. You can be a strong atheist and say there is no God. There just is no such being. Now, that's not the view I maintain. I maintain a weaker view. So there's secondarily weaker atheism, which doesn't mean cowardly atheism or intellectual weakling atheism. It simply means atheism which puts forth a weaker claim. Instead of saying there is no God, you say simply there are no good reasons for believing in one.
Well, that sounds to me like you hold open the possibility that you could be wrong.
Not really. I mean, of course you have to always hold open the possibility. What would it be like if I said, no, there is absolutely no possibility that I could be wrong? Nobody should ever say that on any subject.
But are you open to, I mean, I got the feeling, now correct me if I'm wrong, Frank Zindler, if you were to have, were to have a religious experience, how would you explain that to yourself?
Well, a religious experience obviously is something that is generated by the chemistry of the brain. And
well, I wouldn't say obviously, but
well, it is to me. But I would like to say, I would like to take a stronger position than Dr. Beversluis has said. I would say that the modern atheist goes really farther and says that all sentences that have the word God in them are not simply false, they are meaningless. You cannot even imagine a way to test these things. You know, we could say, strike, and nothing happened. I could say, well, that proves there's no God. But I don't think anybody in the audience is going to take that as a good test of it. But there is no way to test whether God does or does not exist. And this puts God's sentences out of the realm of truth or falsehood. They are simply meaningless.
Okay, I do want to get back to the issue of faith, though, because I think that's needless to say at the basis of this. Let's take a phone call first, and then we know we have some strong comments from the audience. Go ahead, please. You're on Night Talk. Your question or comment?
Yes, there was a comment in the phone call, that little sequence you had about how man thinks for himself. First of all, I'm a Christian, and something I find that's very profound is how these gentlemen, these men who are educated men here on your panel, they tend to rule out, man thinks for himself. If you think that you're going to be able to walk through this world, murder people, rape people, and do things that are detrimental to your body, to other people, to your world, your neighborhood, I don't put much faith in man. Man's getting ready to blow himself up off the face of the earth any, day now. We're living on the brink of a very...
Okay, so excuse me for interrupting because we're short on time, but your point then is that that the belief in God is the basis of morality. Is that a fair analysis of what you're saying?
Well, I just don't think it's right that, these men, I'm sure they're very well educated, but I don't think it's very right for them to come out and make it like, a Christian is, a little bit, their elevator don't reach to the top,
Okay.
They're not home. That strikes me very upsetting.
Okay, thank you very much for calling. Thank you very much. Let's take some comments from the audience. Go ahead, stand up, sir. Your name, please.
My name is Dale Holzbauer, and I'm a Christian. And I find it incredible. First of all, the subject, they jump so quickly from subject to subject that it's impossible to reply. It's just impossible. And I find it very interesting that four men who are supposedly educated make statements like, well, there's no evidence for the Bible, no evidence for the existence of God, when in fact there's a lot of evidence. And
we're listening.
Yeah, that's fine.
You will
sure.
tell us some.
Oh, I'll be glad to, sure. Have you considered the evidence of prophecy, for instance? Have you considered the evidence of Old Testament prophecy?
Like the book of Daniel, which was written 200 or 300 years after it.
All right, wait, Frank, just go ahead.
If that's true, then how come the Septuagint version of the Bible, of which we still have copies,
and they disagree with the Hebrew?
BC. No, they don't. Go back
you
to
haven't
250
studied them,
BC.
sir. The Hebrew and the Septuagint differ extraordinarily.
Now,
let this gentleman have a say.
Okay.
Obviously, they differ because one's in Greek and one's in Hebrew.
I'm not talking about that.
No.
They even have different paragraphs.
The point
and
I'm
chapters.
making is, as you very well know, that we have copies of the Scripture that go back at least 250 years before Christ, and in many cases a lot more. In the Old Testament, there are at least 330 prophecies about Christ, just about Him. A selected 8, just 8, according to J.B. Stoner, Ph.D. in mathematics, a selected 8, the odds against those coming through would be the same as covering the state of Texas, 2 feet deep with silver dollars, Mark 1, blindfolded man picks it out on the first try. A selected 48 goes it's incredible. That's just prophecy. Then we have the evidence of logic, we have the evidence of archaeology. There's a tremendous amount of evidence. I don't know where you've been reading or what you've been reading, but the evidence is there, and you simply make the blanket statement, well, it's not there. Well, that's not good enough.
Okay, Frank, finish up. You've been laughing now. Let's have a response.
Really amusing, because he obviously has not studied any of the ancient Hebrew manuscripts of which he speaks, or the Greek manuscripts. They disagree on thousands of things. And this so-called prophecy is usually nothing of the sort. The book of Daniel, for example, was a fraud written hundreds of years after the Babylonian captivity. It has the wrong king of Israel being captured. It has the wrong last king of Babylon. It has an imaginary person liberating the Babylonians. It is total nonsense.
Okay, I have a feeling, and we can only do this a little bit longer. If we're going to simply disagree on the way to interpret the Bible, we'll probably get nowhere. But can reasonable people disagree on how to interpret the Bible?
Reasonable people can agree on methods of interpretation, but the Christian view is that the Bible is absolutely inerrant, cover to cover. Now, you made some statements that are absolutely false, and I'll just challenge one of them. You said Daniel gives the wrong last king of Babylon.
That's right. He has Jehoiakim instead
of
Jehoiakim.
Now that's the Jewish king. We're talking about the Babylonian king. So you haven't been reading.
He has King Belshazzar, and there never was such a person.
Oh, yes, there was. And as you very well know, he was co-regent with his father.
There is no evidence for that.
Oh, there is.
And it also says his father was Nebuchadnezzar.
Well, I'd be curious, Frank, why you've spent so much time studying something you don't believe in.
I was going to be a Lutheran minister. I was going to be a Lutheran minister, and I learned too much to stay in it.
All right. Final comment. We'll get back to you, Dale, I promise.
Final comment is this. These fellas, and God love them, and God does love them, and I love you too, and hope you get saved one of these days, because if you don't, you're going to die like all the rest of us, but there'll be a difference in our deaths. Bertrand Russell, who was a philosopher many, many years, died at 95, 96 years of age a few years ago, said this: philosophy has proved to be a washout to me. Now, you will find that in your life one of these days, I hope sooner instead of later. Now, I've got a lot more to say, but...
Okay, I'll get back to you, I promise.
He's making up myths right now.
Yes.
Okay. Hold it. You have I'm sure you want to respond. Let's real quickly, and we have to take a break. Go ahead, John, quickly.
Bertrand Russell, in the preface to a book just before he died, said, "Rumors have been spread abroad that I'm becoming more sympathetic to Christianity. These rumors are false."
Yeah, well, I know that's true, but he also said philosophy for me was a complete washout.
Could you,
could
you tell me which book he said that in? I'd like to check the reference.
Okay, I don't think that's going to get us anywhere. Tony, go ahead, Mr.
What did I want to say? Probably he's quoting Bertrand
Russell.
Rhetoric,
is Frank's debate with the Reverend, by the way, if you don't mind my giving away your occupation, is Frank's debate with the Reverend, does that get us anywhere?
I don't think that's to the point. I have to agree, of course, that there is lots of evidence. Just as there's lots of evidence for Santa Claus. The cookies are gone Christmas morning. The point is, the relevant point is that the evidence is all of excruciatingly poor quality. It's bad evidence. There are serious flaws in all of the famous proofs for God's existence.
But
and
the reason it would seem to me the evidence isn't the issue, because I don't think anybody here believes in God because there is evidence. They believe in God despite the fact there isn't evidence.
That's right.
Okay. Now you're against me too, Reverend. I can't win here. Okay.
No, you see, there are many ways to come to a knowledge of God. Many ways. For some folks, it's emotional. For me, it wasn't. For me, it was logic. The emotion to me doesn't mean a whole lot. When I studied the evidence, when I looked at 100 billion galaxies, when I looked at myself, when I looked at the world of nature, when I realized I had a conscience, when I studied history and saw that men have always worshipped something, and the forms have differed, and we know that. Where'd that all come from?
Okay, is the similarity, I mean, this is an issue in anthropology we hear a lot, the fact that there are similarities.
There is a branch of anthropology that is devoted to the study of religion. And that's where it probably belongs.
We've got to take a break. They're going crazy in the control room. 632, I can't see the number and I always forget it. 632-5900 is the number for tickets if you want to come next week. If you'd like to be part of the show, give us a call now and ask your question or comment. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Join our Night Talk audience. Call for tickets at 632-5900 Monday through Friday. Our phone lines are open. Give us a call at 632-6027.
Thank you, everybody. Once again, 632-6027, questions and comments to our guests about the topic of atheism and faith. We invite you to call in right now. And we do have a phone call. Let's take it right now. You are on Night Talk. Go ahead with your question or comment, please. Go ahead, please.
Your panel is speaking of God in terms of Christianity, such as Jesus Christ. Do they believe in any God, a superior force, a creator? And if not, how do they explain the universe?
Okay, this is a question you probably get a lot. The woman is asking, I know you had trouble hearing it. If you don't believe in a Christian God, do you believe any God? If you don't believe in any God, how do you explain our existence, the origin of the earth?
I don't think any of us believe in any God. I mean,
or goddesses.
Yes. Well, we don't believe in anybody's God. We don't believe our goddesses, all right. In Jewish gods, we don't believe in none of the gods.
I don't like to use the phrase believe in because I think it leads to muddle-headedness, and it is an ambiguous phrase. I think the belief is always propositional. You should always say believe that. We do not believe that there exists a being you can find described under G in the dictionary, G-O-D. There is no such being answering to that description, just as there is no such being answering to Santa Claus, unicorn, mermaid, or tooth fairy.
Right.
There is no being answering to that description. I think that's the whole point.
By that you mean a God that has power to influence the circumstances of your life.
Right.
Thereby, if there wasn't a God that had power to influence the circumstances of your life, then there would be no sense in praying. And we don't think there's any sense in praying.
No, but that wasn't the questioner's question. The questioner asked, how do you explain where the universe came from if there's no God? And it's a perfectly legitimate question. And the point I want to make is Christianity seems to answer that question. So does Judaism, but it really doesn't. It's hard to make this point because when I make it, it will seem trivial and silly. But put it this way. When I was about 15 years old, I had a sister who was 8, and every night I read her a bedtime story. And one of the books that she had was entitled Questions Children Ask. And I would read her this book. She loved it. I read it to her night after night after night. Who made the sky? God. Who made the birds? God. Who made the ocean? God, and so on. 30, 40 pages. Same answer. On the last page, the question occurred, and who made God? And the answer was, that's a question children ask. See, now, just a second. That's a question children ask, yes, but it's also a question that philosophers, theologians, and reflective people ask. Now, the point I want to make is, let's say there is a God who created the world. Let's just assume that for the sake of argument. Then we must ask, and who created him? And if you say nobody created him, then you're granting that something could always exist. Your only difference is, what is it?
Okay, is there a reaction in the audience to that? Please stand up.
Sheila Jenkins. I would say, in response to that, biblically, all right, is my understanding that the Hebrew concept, okay, granted, all right, we going into this Christianity, but Christianity has roots, and it happens to be the Old Testament, and you cannot really consider Christ without going back to the Old Testament. And, I can't anyway, because it doesn't make any sense. So, as a historical personage, the Hebrew concept of God is one where it's simply a matter of assumption. The Hebrew people never tried to explain. It was presumption or presumptive to them, my understanding of the literature and the text. And so this was an issue with which they did not deal. It was simply a given. I am that I am,
Okay, but that's sort of what their point is, and where does that get?
Precisely, that's what I'm saying, but that's...
So why can't it just be a given that the universe
So you don't question it. There is nowhere to go. He is omnipresent. He is omniscient. This is, by definition. So this is what makes God different from any other being. He has these qualities that are beyond our ability to conceive and to, reach and so forth.
But in part, this speaks to the issue I wanted to get to, and that is one of faith. Given the fact that you can point historically to cases where there has been friction and conflict between nations due to religion, could not one point to, if one is looking to justify religion and belief in God, to people whose lives are better enriched and because of their belief?
Well, I would say that faith is a very, very dangerous habit. It is basically self-defeating. Faith really is belief in things which have no evidence to support them. And real faith is belief in things against the evidence. So you have, for example, creationists today who, despite all the evidence of science, still think the earth is 6,000 years old and God zapped everything here just like that. Faith is dangerous because if you will believe one thing without good evidence, why then will you not believe some other thing without good evidence? And if we can get you to believe three things without good evidence, I have a bridge in Brooklyn I will lease to you for really great rates, and you can collect the tolls. And
let's take a quick phone call, then we'll get back to this. Go ahead, please. You're on Night Talk. Your question or comment? Go ahead.
Yes, hello, Dick.
Hello there. How are you?
Very good. This is Dick here in Indianapolis, and I would like to disagree with three of the gentlemen on several points. First of all...
Make your points quickly, please.
All right. First of all, Mr. Lincoln knew the Bible very well, quoted it often, kept a copy on his desk. Next of all, they were talking about Christians who make mistakes, and I might add that many people are misled about things from the Bible. But if they want to talk about atheists, there is a country that does things their way. It's Russia, Red China. They've killed 120 million people in this century, and I think it's a tragic thing that people would believe in atheism, because except for the Bible, fundamental belief in God, we would have severe problems.
Okay, so your point is you think that the Bible, again, is the basis of some kind of moral behavior.
Definitely.
Okay, gentlemen.
Well, what I did in this is, again, this veiled threat, you see. If you don't believe the way we do, why don't you leave our country? This is a thing that atheists are put up against all the time. Christians, and I speak about Christians because they are the majority of the oppressors, they are terrified of having people like us up here allowed to say the things we're saying, and they want us to leave the country. They somehow think that atheism is un-American, and I want to tell them that atheism is American as apple pie.
You're not communist.
Of this country.
None of
we
you
are not communists.
Okay, that's what a lot of people think.
The founders of America were as close to atheism as they could be, given the development of science at the time, 1776.
Well, in fact, they want to make this country a theocracy.
That's right.
Where a condition of citizenship is that you believe in God. That's
what
Falwell is all
there
about.
There are 4 states yet that have in their state constitutions discriminatory paragraphs against atheists. You cannot hold public office. In Pennsylvania, Mississippi, Arkansas, and South Carolina, if you do not believe in a supreme being.
Okay, Frank, let's take a comment from the audience.
My name is David Creeley.
A little louder, David.
My name is David Creeley, and all right, I understand what you're saying. I comprehend it. I do not agree with it, because one of you mentioned earlier of Jews, Muslims, Christians, and then a little bit later on, Buddhists. All right, I'm not talking about...
Okay, what's your point? Ask your question.
The point is that what he was saying before, moralities. The form of religion is basically not of terror, but of hope. And if you don't have hope, then you don't have anything.
Okay, now that's a fair, thank you. That's what I was getting at before. Is not hope, is not faith important to many people? And can't we speak? See, we have 2 issues here. Is there a God? And let's assume that there isn't a God for 1 second. Maybe there's something to be said for believing in one.
Well, how then do you explain the Catholic kids throwing the rocks at the Protestant kids and the Protestant kids throwing them back in Northern Ireland?
Okay, I'd like to know that myself, by the way. Dale?
Sure. You don't see too many counterfeit nickels, and the reason is that nickels aren't worth counterfeiting. However, great artworks, stamps, and large denominations of money are often counterfeited. My point is simply this. What is valuable is often counterfeited. There are many counterfeit Christians. You gentlemen may have not run into the real thing in your whole life. I don't know. You talk about the problems in Ireland and this and that. Listen, anyone that could kill another person in cold blood is not a Christian. I don't care what label they wear. They're not Christians. You need to study the real McCoy and stop dealing in counterfeits and say, see, this guy here, he says this, and he claims to be a Christian. You may make the claim.
By definition, anybody who breaks those commandments or kills anybody, therefore, is not a Christian.
Well, they could be a saved person, but they could be a sinning person and need to get right with God again. The point is, we hold those up as a norm. What about the IU professor who was a pimp a few years ago? Would you like me to hold that as a norm for professors?
Okay, John?
I think that when you make that kind of a point, you open yourself up to the most damaging criticisms that you could possibly experience, because not only are there people in the Bible, Old and New Testament, who commit murder after murder, atrocity after atrocity. Not only.
God commands it.
God does command.
Kill all the Midianites, even the little children.
Now, why did he do that?
May I go on with my point?
Because he was a wicked, evil being.
No, because you're not aware of the Ugarit tablets.
Okay, let's not argue the Bible. John, finish your point quickly, please.
No, my point is, not only are there people who do this time and time again, they do it at God's command.
Do what time and time again?
Kill.
Yeah.
Steal, break the moral law on every point, at God's command. God tells Joshua to go into the city of Canaan, the promised land, and slaughter every one of the inhabitants down to the last woman and child.
Why did he do that? You answer
I don't know why, but you said he
couldn't.
couldn't.
You don't know about the Ugaritic tablets
your
and what
point,
they discovered about Canaanite worship, do you?
I wish
you don't know that God said, I demand my people to be pure. They were going to take the land. This polluted race, which did everything under the sun, God said they must be obliterated.
Your point was, I think, everyone heard you say, no one who commits murder could be a Christian.
Unless God says to do it. God writes the law. If God orders people to do something in His name for His cause, that's a little different than me presuming to do it and then say, I'm still a good Christian.
Okay, we got to take a quick break. We'll come back and finish this part of the discussion. Stay with us, everybody. We're back in a minute.
Join our Night Talk audience. Call for tickets at 632-5900 Monday through Friday. Our phone lines are open. Give us a call at 632-6027.
Thank you very much. We're back, and we're going to take a phone call. And please, state your question quickly. We are short on time. Your question or comment right now, please. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I'd like to make a statement. they believe that the Bible was written by human beings and all fictional, then I'd like to ask a question. I'd like to ask either one of them if they really know for sure who their real mother and father are, because at the time they were born, they had to believe human beings.
I'm sorry, the last part of that, they what?
When they were born, it was written on a piece of paper who their mother and father were.
So you're saying they have to have faith in who their mother and father was?
Exactly.
Okay, Lloyd, go ahead.
I know positively who my mother was.
You have a hell of a memory, Lloyd.
Further than that, I won't go, but let's trust to luck. I do bear a striking physical resemblance to my father.
Okay.
Therefore, one would normally assume that I would be my father's son.
The whole business about faith is just an excuse for not thinking.
I would like to...
We all hope, I wish there was some pie in the sky that I were going to get when I die. But the point is that we all base our lives on the probability. I sit here because the probability is very high that the ceiling's not going to fall, although it may well do that. And the probabilities are overwhelmingly against the existence of God.
But you leave open the possibility that you could be wrong, and I ask you, sir...
If all of the mathematical equations to the 10 most difficult problems suddenly appear, written in the clouds, I will revise my opinion.
And if you someday, sir, should meet your maker, and he should say to you, Tony, what happened? For all those years, why didn't you believe in me? What are you going to say?
Answer this gentleman who said we were heading in different directions. If the maker he refers to has any integrity, and if he has any sense of justice, he is going to admire my integrity. He cannot possibly expect me to believe something which appears to me to be absolute nonsense. And so I'm going to heaven also.
Stand up.
My name is Eugene Manson. I think in the book of Deuteronomy, we read that the things that are revealed for us are for our edification, but the things which are not revealed are left for God. And as human beings, we are finite, and God is infinite, so we can't pitch, the two beings like God and human beings against each other. We cannot stand against his, intellect. So I don't see why we should want to prove that God exists.
His point is that why have to prove it? And that's part of
Well, it's true you can take anything on faith. The point that we try to make, though, is that religion can be detrimental to one's good mental health. For instance, this is Indiana and Indianapolis. Where are all the Indians? What did the kind Christians do to them? They marched them, many of them dying, all the way to Oklahoma. The treatment, in fact, they couldn't make the Indians slaves. They were no good. And so they captured people from Africa and brought them over here, the black people that live here today.
I'd like to say something about that. You mentioned there, you was talking about mental health and things like that as far as Christians have problems with mental health. But I look at your position, where you're from. Where is your meaning and purpose in life? Where does your worldview, what does it say about man and what he is? What does it say about his self-image? It says, there's no, it's just an animal, no meaning and purpose in life.
I am because I am.
What about future? What about the future?
I work hard for the future. I worry about population growth. I worry about pollution. I work on behalf of those.
It would seem pretty depressing to me to think that at the end of my life, all there is darkness and that's it.
And that's the end. All. If you realize that's all there is, it's not depressing.
Can I still speak here?
It's a fact for us.
Okay.
Make your point. Go ahead.
Okay, well, my point is, excuse me, your worldview can only lead to despair. There's no meaning and purpose in life. There's no positive self-image, and there's no hope for the future.
Well, this is a very serious misconception. Atheists live for real things. We live for those positive things that make life worth living. We make these ourselves. We don't have to have somebody else tell us what to live for. We live for things like truth, for the perception of beauty, for the experience of love. Now, you will not find that in religion.
Where's your base for truth? And right and wrong?
Well, you go to science for truth. You don't go to the Bible. That's the first rule. Okay?
Dick, you wanted to touch on separation of church and
Okay,
state.
but let's just deal with this. Real quickly, we have to take a break, then we'll come back and talk about that. The issue of truth, that seems to be what everybody responded to. How does one establish some normative approach to truth?
Okay, in science we establish truth by observation and experimentation. And in religion there is no way to establish truth. You cannot do experiments. Therefore religion is totally outside the pale of knowledge. You cannot have such a thing as religious knowledge. that is a contradiction in terms. So truth can only come from the exercise of the process of science.
The scientific method. And may I say, philosophically, we establish truth by analysis, by consistency, by clarity, by analysis of meanings. That's another way to establish truth. Maybe not different from the scientific method.
Or logical truth,
sure.
Yes.
How are you guys doing socially? I mean, is it tough being an atheist?
No, actually,
I mean, you got a lot of friends. Are some of your best friends Christians?
I live in a small town. Everybody knows I'm an atheist, and they know I'm a decent guy, and I get along just fine with everybody in the town.
Yeah, well, I bet you that's...
I'm not a closet atheist, incidentally.
Yeah. May I say, that's an ad hominem issue, by the way, Dick, and irrelevant. But I think one important point about having us on this panel is to establish that we have not just come from murdering some children or from bombing three churches. We, in fact, are members of our community. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of the Mansfield Symphony Orchestra. I write their program notes. I'm a member of Planned Parenthood.
And they know that you're an atheist.
So forth. Of course they know when I'm
Well, I think that's a fair question, because I think we're curious whether you are really...
I mean, we're real people, we're real members of our community. We disagree on this point.
That's true, but oftentimes, if you admit you're an atheist, you promptly lose your job.
Okay, I want to talk about some of the legal issues, separation of church and state. We have one more segment. We'll take a short break. We'll come right back. Stay with us, everybody.
Get in on the Night Talk. Call now, 632-6027. Join our Night Talk audience. Call for tickets at 632-5900 Monday through Friday.
$632-5900 to call for tickets for next week. Our topic next week is gay life here in Indianapolis and homosexuality. And Lloyd Thoren sent me a pamphlet, I think, What is a Gay Atheist? So we're covering all bases next week, right? Wasn't that your pamphlet that you sent me?
We have all kinds, black ones, gay ones,
everybody.
And all different kinds.
Okay. Let's touch on, in the 10 minutes or so we have left, this issue of church and state and school prayer and everything like that. You had mentioned before, Frank, that go ahead.
I would like to do that. Atheists, I think, and I can speak for them generally, prefer maximizing freedom in any country. I mean, we like people to be free, to express themselves, to be different one from the other. We do not like everybody as a bunch of sheep in a flock. That is a horrendous kind of condition, we think. And so, therefore, what is happening now in our country is the religionists are gaining strength from their tax exemption benefits, and Falwell and all of his type are able now to try to force America to become a theocracy, where it could be a condition that either you espouse Christianity or you lose your right to vote. It could go very far, and it is shocking and frightening to those of us who cherish our American freedom.
The basic insight of the Founding Fathers, and it was a terrific one. It's not because they said it, but it's because what they said was correct, was that you cannot legislate anything about a person's private fantasies. I cannot stop you from imagining that Jesus did something or other. I cannot stop you from imagining that Santa Claus does something or other. And I really want to suggest that analogy to you because I think it's so close, Santa Claus and God. But we cannot legislate fantasies, and therefore we cannot allow them to enter the public arena, the public domain. And they wisely wrote that into the Constitution.
632-6027. Still some time left. Give us a call, please.
Well, I mentioned that there were some states that, in their constitutions, discriminate against atheists. And
discriminate, but is it effectively used? I mean, do they...
Well, we have not, after all these years of legal wrangling, we still haven't got these off the books, so it is effective. Just one of these, Arkansas Constitution, Article 19. No person who denies the being of a God shall hold any office in the civil department of this state, nor be competent to testify as a witness in any court. I'd like to know how many people in the audience agree with that statement.
Yeah, I'd be curious. Now, if you can separate for a second your views about God in terms of these gentlemen, but how many would applaud a statue like that? Would anybody favor something like that? Okay, it seems not. So, I mean, reasonable people obviously can agree on some things. Okay.
I bet if your audience were to read the statement of principles, objectives, etc. of American Atheists, they wouldn't disagree with a single one of those either.
Somebody else? Go ahead. Greg?
Okay, one thing that I want to say is, first of all, a lot of the questions that are being asked,
you're beating around the bush on the point. For instance, Dick just asked, is that effectively used, the fact that a person that doesn't believe in God can't hold an office? You said it's still on the books. That wasn't the question. The question was, is it effectively used? Another point I want to bring up that you mentioned earlier in the program, you came off right away, said there is no proof of the existence of God. Then, after Dale mentioned something, you said, well, that's poor proof. And then right after that, someone said God is an evil being. So right there, you just said that there is a God. So far, I have not heard any logical proof, and I don't know if anybody else has. Maybe I missed something, but I have not heard any logical proof that you guys have that there is no God.
Okay, but their suggestion is... Okay, we're back where we started from real quickly. Yeah, John?
Well, the reason why this is so hard is because people often shift grounds. I mean, we've tried two strategies here. I started off saying you started off saying, and I repeated, the burden of proof is always on the person who makes the claim. Now, the atheist doesn't have to explain why he or she does not believe in God. The atheist just denies what the theist says. The theist has to explain. So when we ask the theist to explain, they will either say, here is my proof, and then we will say that's not a good proof. Then they'll say, here is another proof, and we will say that's not a good proof either. And we'll keep doing that until the proofs stop, and when all the proofs have been criticized, then they will say it's not a matter of proof at all, it's a matter of faith.
But yes, but in all fairness, it sounds to me like no matter what proof they would offer to you, that you are not any more open. Wait. You're not any more open to proof that there is a God than they are open to proof that there isn't. Is that fair? Is that fair?
If these people were not taught about God when they were young children, they would never had any way to know whether or not there was a God. It is in the early training. That's why the preachers today want mandatory prayer in public school. Or voluntary prayer, which essentially is mandatory, because they must then be a sort of an odd fellow to say, I don't want to do that.
Let me get in Mike Graddison here from the ACLU here in town, and then we'll take a break and we'll come back. But Mike, we had alluded to the fact that there are laws in some states where atheists are not allowed to hold jobs, etc. Do you have any experience whether that, in fact, is enforced, and just an overview from you?
We've had, I'm not aware of any complaints being brought against those laws. I think they are obviously not enforced in any of those states I'm aware of. It's a shame they're on the books, because I think clearly the founding fathers of our country believe very strongly in separation of church and state. We're being very concerned this year because there's confusion of politics and religion this year. And we're concerned about religious particularity becoming involved with social and political agenda in our country. We think that's entirely inappropriate. For them to say that only those who are atheists or agnostics, whatever, are concerned about what Jerry Falwell and his co-religionists are doing in this political election year is not true, because there are a lot of people who are profoundly religious who are also concerned, extremely concerned, and about the fact that religion and politics are becoming inextricably bound up in this election year, and how unfortunate that is for all of us.
Can I ask you a personal question? Do you believe in God? You don't have to answer.
That isn't. I think you have to respect my right to.
Okay, no, I do indeed. But the reason I do indeed. But the reason I asked that is because you had made the point that one can be religious and still respect the fact that there has to be that separation. That's why I asked.
Absolutely. There's also another point which I found kind of interesting about the IRA and Ian Paisley and his group in Northern Ireland, which is an analogy that's been brought up frequently this evening. And obviously Ian Paisley and his group believe that God's on their side, and they have to go out and attack Catholics, and the Catholics obviously believe, and they're led by their co-religious and attacking the members of Ian Paisley's group, that God's on their side. So they each have the sanction of God. I don't know where the twain shall meet. It's highly regrettable, and there's religion and politics being inextricably bound up again, and people end up with blood flowing in the streets, and that's what happens.
Thank you for proving our point.
Intolerance is intolerable.
Okay, let's take a break. We'll come back, and we'll get some more questions and comments in just a moment. Stay with us, everybody. Thank you, everybody. We're running out of time, and I'm losing my voice, so we're just going to sum up here in the next 2 or 3 minutes. I've got to ask you something, gentlemen. All of you have children, I know that. How would you feel if through whatever process your child came to you, and maybe in fact they already have, and said, do you know, Dad, I respect what you believe or don't believe, depending on how they phrase it, but you know something, I really think there's something to this God thing. How would you react?
I'd probably say, well, gee, I'm kind of sad for you, but if that's what you want to go, the way you want to go, why, do it, you know.
Really?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, I would go further than that. I would say dedicate your life to God. Become a priest or preacher. If God is important in your life, for heaven's sakes, do something about it. You just, what are you going to have? An Easter Sunday God? You know, I go to church. I go to church every Easter Sunday.
Yeah, but by saying that, you seem to suggest that there's some truth to the fact that people who devote themselves to God make themselves better people as a result of it.
No, I didn't say that.
I know you didn't.
I said if you do, then you should dedicate your life to God.
I of course, have not had to face such a thing. My daughter is 19, and she's still fully in charge of her faculties. It's kind of hard to imagine if one has given up his belief in the Easter Bunny, going back to believing in the Easter Bunny. Now, I realize that things can happen. You can get in an automobile accident, have brain damage and things like this. And
yeah, but John, Frank, let me interrupt. You know what troubles me in the last minute that we have? It seems to me that kind of rhetoric, which obviously creates a big response in the audience, it seems to me that we've bridged so many gaps in the last 10 or 15 years, maybe between straights and gays and maybe between blacks and whites, but maybe there is some dialogue that could come out of atheists talking to believers, and I think that kind of rhetoric is detrimental if, in fact, you believe that any kind of dialogue between the two might be helpful.
No one will deny that Christians occasionally do the right thing. They do the right thing morally. The only point we emphasize is that you do the right thing for the wrong reasons. Yeah. If you help somebody, you should be helping somebody because they are fellow human beings in this miserable vale of tears, and you want to help them, not because some imaginary being ordered you to help them. They do the right things for the wrong reasons. Of course they do. Of course Mother Teresa is doing some good things. Of course. No one's going to deny that.
Final comment, John.
Well, the religious issue is not all that different from any other issue. You ask, how would you feel if one of your children would become a Christian or a religious believer? Why not ask, how would you feel? Ask any parent how they would feel if their child espoused any view that they thought was indefensible and maybe even harmful. That's one thing. That's one point I wanted to make. Another point I wanted to make was, it's not as if this is the end of the line. I assume that you've been having conversations with this child for many, many years. If the child comes to you at one point and says, well, Dad, I've come to accept Christianity, I wouldn't just say, be a priest then. I would say rather, but what about all the things we've talked about? What do you say about this? What do you say about that? What I would want to do most of all would be to prevent some kind of a gap from occurring between myself and my child. All too often, Christian parents are angry at their children when they become non-Christian, non-religious. It's also very easy for a non-Christian, an atheist, to become angry with their child for becoming a believer. I think that's deadly. What you should do above all costs is say, let's hear your view, let's keep talking about it. This is not the last conversation we'll ever have.
Okay, but this is the last conversation we will have because we are out of time. A couple of pieces of business. By the way, I just want to, Frank Zindler has asked, and the panel has asked indeed, that we give you some information about where to get in touch with people at the American Atheist magazine, and we're also going to give you the phone number where you can dial an atheist if you would like to hear their inspirational message. Is that fair enough?
They change every day.
It changes every day. And I think, is that number up, Bill? That number is up, and we ask you if you are interested to call or write for more information. Next week, our topic is homosexuality. We'll be talking to 4 members of the gay community here in Indianapolis, as well as a professor who is going to give his points of view. Our number for tickets is 632-5900. You can call us any day, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we thank all of our guests for being with us for an enlightening discussion. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll see you next week. Thanks for being with us, everybody.
Night Talk has been brought to you by White Castle Hamburger.